So something I might want to do is pass some data to my components. So for example here I have a header component and I might want to have a custom text that I render right here. So instead of saying hi every time, I might want to pass in the variable or some kind of parameter that they can now pass and display that word here. So I can do that by adding it onto the tag right here. So here's our header tag where we're rendering the component, and then I can give it a name. So I'm going to say title, and then you set it equal to something. So for here I'm going to pass in a string and I'm going to say hello from app. And now in my header nothing's going to change right now. We're still going to see hi over here because I'm not using this parameter anyway. So the way I can use this parameter is through this.props. So this.props is an object and it has the name of all the parameters that the person put on that. So here we have one parameter called title and it's a string. So what I could do is display it right here. So you may think you do something like this.props.title. But if we give that a save, you'll notice it says this.props.title, but it doesn't actually render the actual title here. And the reason for that is if you just put the text in here, it treats it as text and not as a variable. So it's a JavaScript variable and we want to render its value. So to do that we can wrap this in curly braces. And now it's going to display the property or the value of this.props.title. So if I save this, and now it says hello from the app, and I can change what I'm passing in here, save it, and it'll reflect there. And so now I can display two different headers back to back, and now I'm using this component twice. I have hello and hello too, but this time they're rendering different things because I'm passing in different variables here. So now you can pass in as many variables that you want here, or as much data as you want, but there's different data you can pass in a different way. So what I mean by that is we passed a string in. If I want to pass a number in, so I'm going to call this num, and I can't just do num is equal to 5. So you have to do curly braces here, and now it's going to be passed in as the number 5. So this we could wrap like that, but it's shorthand to be able to remove the curly braces. So strings are the only ones that you can do that for, I believe. Everything else you want to pass into this component, you have to wrap in curly braces. So here's a number. So I could say this.props.title, and below that, why don't we display in a div this.props.num. And now we're displaying the number that the user passes in. So this object that is just contains all the data. So it has title, it has num, and anything else we pass in. And we can pass in pretty much any data. So for example, I can pass in my own object. So I'm going to say my object. And so I'm going to say curly brace. And then this is my object. So right now I'm passing an empty object in. And I might say A is equal to 5 and B is equal to 6. So now I have an object with two keys. And I can access that here. So I can say this.props.myObject.A and this.props.myObject.B. And now I have two, and they're going off the screen a little bit, but we can access the keys here. And we can also, one thing you can do is, or you can't do, is display an object. So if I try just putting an object there, it doesn't like it. You can't just display an object. But I can turn this into a string if I want to, by doing JSON stringify. So what JSON stringify does is takes an object and turns it into a string. So here we pass in our object, and then we turn it into a string, and we can view the string version of that object, and we can see that there. Other things you can pass in are arrays, for example. So let's say my array, and here's what an array looks like. And again, we can, for example, here render the first element in the array. So this.props.myArray, and I'm going to get the first element in that array. And now we can see 1 is here. If I were to change this to 10, we can see that value change every time. And then the next thing, another thing you do a lot, or at least a decent amount that's good to be aware of, is you can actually pass functions in. So I'm going to say my function. Now let's say I create my function here. I'm going to say const add, and it's going to take A and B, and it's going to add A and B together. So that is a Lambda function right here, and I'm assigning it to the variable add, so I can pass in add here. And so what I can do is I can say this.props.myFunction, and my function is a function that takes two parameters, a and b, so I can actually call it here, so with 10 and 12, and it's actually going to return an integer which we can display in the div. So give that a save, and we can see 22 is displayed there. Now, I don't have to have this intermediate variable here. I can actually pass the Lambda right in there. So I can pass it in like this. And you'll see that happen in React sometimes. So here is a Lambda function that I just passed in. And we see it being rendered the same way. Also, I can create a add function or a function inside of the class. So let's say I have my add right here, a, b, and now it's going to return a plus b. Alright, so this is just a function that we have in our class. We can pass that through here with this.add, and we're going to get the same result. So now this is pretty useless right now, at least with its current just passing an add function, but that'll become more handy when we learn some other things about React down the line. But that is how you pass data to a class component. So you just access it through this.props. But we have another type of component up here, right? So this is a functional component, and this functional component, I can't do this.props. So here's our body. I'm going to just pass in text, and let's see if we can get that to display here. So if I try to do the same thing, I'm going to say this.props.text. It's not going to like it. So it says cannot read properly the text of undefined. And the reason for that is this is undefined. There is no this.props. Instead, your props is passed as the first argument to the function. So props right here. So now what I can do is I can do props.text, and it works. So I get it as that first parameter to my function. So, and I can take as many things as I want. So here's my div. Let's surround the tag there. Alright, and I might want to have a second one here, and I can say text2. So also right now by default this stuff is going to be undefined, right? Because no one's passing in text2 to the body down here, but I can now pass it in. So if it's not passed in, it's undefined. So text2 I am cool too, and now we can see both of those are being passed in. So it works the same way. We can pass in a function if we want to, just like we were above. And now we have our add function that we're passing to our body. And now I can say props.add, or sorry, my function, which is calling the add, just like we were before. The other thing, or last thing that I want to mention is these are kind of invocations of the component. So you saw that I could create multiple components. I can create multiple bodies the same way, and I can pass in different data, and it will display differently. And that's the cool thing about this, is now I can create components where I can use in multiple places, and they can be generic because I can pass in the generic information as props. So these are props right here. That's why I named it props up here. You'll hear people talk about props all the time in React. That's what they are. They're just passing the data to your own custom components. So that's it for this video, guys. That's how props works.